To help you better understand my intellectual evolution, I think you need to know a little bit about my upbringing. I grew up in Romeo, Michigan, which is a small town about an hour north of Detroit. It's a predominantly white town, 91% white actually, I found out when I looked at the census data. And I consider my family to be middle class. I grew up in a really happy home. I'm one of 4 girls. My parents are still married. Growing up, we took family vacations. This is a photo of my family on a vacation we took to California when I was 15 to visit my uncle. My sisters and I were given the opportunity to attempt and fail at things like sports teams. Here's a photo from when my dad tried to get us to play softball and coached our team. Not a great experience for him because we were all terrible at softball. But, we had the opportunity to explore our interests. And we spent summers up north in the family RV. We had a place in Port Sanilac. We still actually go up there to this day. And then after high school, I attended Macomb Community College for 2 years to save money, which is a decision I'm still extremely happy with to this day. And then I transferred to Western my junior year and graduated with a degree in tourism and travel. A few months after graduating, I was hired in at Macomb Community College as a student activities assistant, which was a part-time position. And then after a year and a half, I moved into the student life and leadership manager position. And in total, I've been at Macomb for 6 years now. I have known very little personal racial injustice in my life. Based on my life experiences, I have focused on 2 theories to use for the analysis of my intellectual evolution: standpoint and intersectionality. The term standpoint was developed by Sandra Harding to define feminist thought that emphasized women's unique perspective on society caused by their social standing. Basically, standpoint theory argues that the everyday experiences of people at the top of a social class limit the information they receive about the world. Unfortunately, traditional science is biased by the upper class, who often influences what and why research is being done and tends to leave out marginalized people. However, marginalized people, and for the purpose of this theory, women in particular, have a better vantage point of factors that influence the social and natural world. This vantage point is seen as a better starting point for higher education and research, and certainly for higher education equity. Intersectionality states that an individual can have multiple identities. If you consider individuals as a singular entity or singular identity, you'll be missing key factors that can lead to incorrect conclusions. This theory was pioneered by Kimberly Crenshaw in her work Demarginalizing the Intersection of Race and Sex, a Black feminist critique of anti-discrimination doctrine, feminist theory, and anti-racist politics. And this was published in 1989. Crenshaw's work was related to feminist thought in Black women, but the theory can be applied in a much broader context, and it will be important in the analysis of my evolution because it encourages me to consider the multiple identities that I have. As a woman, I clearly identified with standpoint theory as I was doing my research. It made sense to me. Yes, as a woman, I have a different perspective on social justice because of the realities I face. However, intersectionality is where I began to make the connection between my own struggles and social justice as a whole. Yes, I have faced inequality because of my gender, but I'm also a middle-class white woman living in America, which gives me certain privileges that, for instance, a Black woman might not have access to. We share some experiences based on gender, yet there are other social justice experiences that I can't relate to that she has experienced because of the color of my skin. I have multiple identities which make me experience social justice in different ways. So now I want to talk about a few of the findings that we discussed in and out of class that really have influenced my intellectual evolution. The first one being Bonilla Silva's book, Racism Without Racists. This was one of our first reading assignments, and when I first started reading it, I found myself being put a little bit on the defensive. I couldn't help thinking, but not me, I'm not a part of this. However, as I continue to read, I continue to realize that even without intention, I have been a part of this idea of colorblind racism. Specifically, when we were reading the chapter on the central frames of colorblind racism, I was reminded of an example of a time that I had participated in that particular frame. Somebody had asked me if I thought the cafeteria my office overlooked experienced student segregation, and I responded yes, but that I thought the students were segregating themselves of their own accord naturally. And this is a really clear example of naturalization, of the naturalization frame. So that really stood out to me, and as I continue to read this book, I continue to realize that I do believe in this idea of colorblind racism, and that at times I'd even been a part of it, which is depressing. And then Oliver and Shapiro's The Structuring of Racial Inequality in American Life was really important to me, specifically the section on inheritance and race, and the idea that inheritance is strongly correlated with an individual's ability to build wealth and savings. And I realized how many of these different types of inheritance applied to me, from my parents purchasing my first car for me, to helping pay for my college, to offering to contribute to the down payment on my house. And I realized how difficult it would have been for me to start saving money or start building wealth if I didn't have these types of inheritance. And that really stood out to me. Additionally, Stanfield's article on the ethnocentric basis of social knowledge production was really important, an important read for me. Basically, the idea that minorities are left out or misrepresented in social sciences because European and American groups dominate this control of information. And they continue to do this and control this information by their control over history books, newspapers, journalism, or journals, television, things like that. And it just so happened that the week that I read this, I also presented on American Indians, and learned that a part of their history, American Indian boarding schools, had all been but erased from American history. And so that connection really solidified the dangers of the colonization of knowledge for me. The article, Critical Race Theory, Racial Microaggression in Campus Racial Climate for Latina and Latino Undergraduates, was an important read for me. It was something that I suppose I was aware of that was happening, but I didn't know the name for it or didn't have a term for it. And now I find myself being much more aware of it, hearing it in my surroundings, catching myself if I almost, accidentally make a microaggression myself. And this is going to be really important to me because if I'm aware of it, I'm going to be able to address it on campus. And then there was an article that I researched on my own called Modern Racism Attitudes Among White Students, the Role of Dominance and Authoritarianism and the Mediating Effects of Racial Colorblindness by Paul Potia and Lisa Spanierman. And basically this article found that white students that are categorized as highly dominant or authoritarian need some special training on campus about the whole idea of the colorblind racial ideology and how to address this with them. Because these students often have very specific motivations for perpetuating colorblind racism on campus. And it talks about that and how we can address that. And I found that to be a very interesting article that I'm going to be able to use in my career.
In summary, I truly believe that the intellectual evolution I've experienced in this class is going to make me a better higher education professional, and here's why. First of all, I now have a much better and deeper understanding of social justice and racial inequality issues that take place in our higher education system. And being aware of those issues is going to help me combat them on my college campus. Secondly, I am now aware of my white privilege, and that doesn't make me a bad person, but I can use the knowledge of this white privilege to use it to my advantage and to, again, try to make some positive changes within the college campus that I work at, but hopefully also within my community and society. And lastly, I now have concrete strategies that I can implement on my college campus to try to overcome some of these social justice and racial inequality issues. And that pretty much sums up my intellectual evolution in a nutshell.
He may not be born of this land, but he was born of this world.